Colleagues, good afternoon. Can I have everyone's attention, please? We're about to start with the penultimate press briefing before the 2016 State of the Nation address next week on Thursday. It's always a pleasure to have these encounters with yourselves. It always serves a great purpose, not only for ourselves, but I'm sure for yourselves and the people who rely on you for information about their parliament, its processes and its business. The Secretary to Parliament will address us and provide us with an update as to where we're at with the rollout of the project, with the organization and the preparations for the State of the Nation address. I will just introduce them to yourselves and we will give them the opportunity to give us the information that they would like to share with us. Secretary to Parliament is Mr. Gengezi Mgidlana, seated at the middle at the table. And to his right is the Deputy Secretary for Support Services, Ms. Baby Tiawa. And at the extreme left is the Acting Deputy Secretary for Core Business, Advocate Mudibeti Pindela. Accompanying them is the senior management of Parliament. In no particular order, I'm just going to introduce them to you. I'll start with maybe with a face that you're seeing for the first time. Mr. Lizo Makele is the new Human Resource Executive for Parliament. Mr. Makele, if you can just wave at us so that they can see you. We also have got right behind Mr. Makele, Ms. Mabato Zungu, who is the Divisional Manager for Institutional Support Division of Parliament. And next to her left is Advocate Zorea Adikari, you all know her, the Head of Legal Services at Parliament. And we have got the Chief Financial Officer for Parliament, Mr. Manenje Manenje. We have got Ms. Siwe Skalk, Ms. Sande Siwe Skalk, who is the Acting Manager in the Office of the Secretary and various other things in the legislative sector. And then we have got the usual suspect, the Secretary to the National Assembly, Mr. Masibulele Kaso. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. You're all welcome. We're happy to have you here. We're now going to invite the Secretary to Parliament to provide us with an update in respect of our preparation and state of readiness for the State of the Nation Address 2016. Secretary to Parliament, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jacobs, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the media. Good morning, colleagues. This is the first media briefing on the state of readiness of Parliament for hosting Sona. You would recall that the President has written to the Speaker of the National Assembly and the Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, basically requesting them to convene a joint sitting on the 11th of February in the evening, so that he can deliver the State of the Nation address. In the lead up to preparations for this particular event, which started last year, we have been working with our colleagues in the executive, colleagues in the province, colleagues in the local authority here, in order to make sure that the preparations are in order and that we have planned properly, we have coordinated our work, and we're able to deliver an event that is very sound and that would make South Africa proud, as is normally the case. We have also, as part of an important step this year, also also ensured that we engage the diplomatic corps, where the presiding officers met with the diplomatic corps in order to brief them on the event of today, the event of the 11th of February 2016. We have had a workshop with yourself earlier on this week in order to take you through the rules, particularly the changes that have been made and how they will be applied, and how you can then interpret those and report on them accordingly, noting that one of your critical functions is that of informing South Africans about what is happening in Parliament. And we regard yourselves as a very important stakeholder in a way of making sure that you report on the business of Parliament and you're able then to articulate things as they happen in Parliament. So it was critical for you to also then understand the recent changes in the rules. Then we are going to be talking about also the measures and improvements that we have introduced in our planning for Sona. So basically today's briefing really would be that process of continuous engagement between Parliament and the people of the Republic of South Africa and yourselves in order to give you an update. That update will come from a wide variety of people within Parliament. It will come from the presiding officers in their various capacities. It will come from the administration to give updates as and when necessary, as it were. Today, of course, we are going to be focusing on the administrative component thereof that talks about the preparations for Sona. The other aspects that cover a wide variety of broader issues will be dealt with by the presiding officers when they meet with you later on next week, so that you can then get an update just 2 days before on how far we have gone in our preparations, as it were. You know that Sona is an extraordinary sitting that combines both the National Council of Provinces and the National Assembly. And the purpose of Sona really is for the President to deliver the program of the government of the day, indicating how government will spend its money and resources. And that will be followed by the budget speech, which then follows up a few days later, which articulates in money terms and financial terms what that program will be doing and where the resources will be going. And in that regard, for this particular sitting now, we have improved rules that we have indicated and basically provided to yourselves and are available to the rest of South Africa that relate to improvements in the way in which the Joint Assembly will deal with issues. Those rules, of course, have been developed by parties in Parliament, and they have been agreed to by both houses and assented, the amendments thereof. They are meant to improve relations between parties, meant to provide a secure environment, an environment that allows parties to dispense of their constitutional responsibilities, as it were, and for them to be able to engage with the public in their respective capacities. You know that the debate is followed by, in fact, the State of the Nation address is followed by a 2-day debate where parties then express themselves on their views on the program that is presented by the President for the year, and that allows them then to basically offer alternative views, offer points of agreement, and also indicate various measures in which they think, as the various parties the business of South Africa must be conducted. The process of Sona is also followed by a public participation process. As you would know, this has been a permanent feature in the preparations for Sona, in a sense that as was started in the initial Sona that we had in 1994 by President Mandela, we have consistently made sure that we draw from various sectors of civil society who partake and participate in this particular event by being present here. We also draw from the various schools and various communities that are invited to participate in this particular event. We have also the Imbongi. In this year, the Imbongi, as you would know, we rotate the Imbongi from the various provinces, and this particular year, we'll have the Imbongi coming from the KwaZulu-Natal province, who will then be providing us with an Imbongi that will basically render his or her praises in this regard just before the State of the Nation's address by the President. Now, our plan, of course, has been ongoing, working with the provinces, our colleagues, in order to make sure that we have eminent people that are invited. You know that we invite eminent people from each of the provinces. So you have about 9 eminent people that will be present as we have agreed with the provincial legislatures in this regard. And the names are being finalized between us and them, and they will be made available in due course. And the schools from the various provinces have been invited also to form the civil guard, which is necessary for the procedure and the ceremonial part of our work, where you would know that in the route that the President will follow, normally we have normally your civil guard of honor, which comprises both of your school children, as it were, and some members of the community who are carefully selected in this regard. When it comes to the budget, as you would know, that South Africa is experiencing, like the rest of the world, a tight economic situation that requires us, of course, to make sure that our plans are, narrowed down and slimmed down to a manageable level. You would recall that when we made the similar briefing last year, we had indicated the budget to you from the previous years. And that budget basically indicated that in 2014, if you would recall, we had a budget of 9.2, and maybe if you are rounding it off, about 9.2 million, which we had planned for Sona. And in June, we spent about 4.6, and you would recall that we had an election, so therefore February, June, we had another Sona. And in 2015, we had a budget of just, at 4 million mark for 2015. And for 2016, we have a budget that is 3.6. I mean, I'm just rounding off the figures, as it were, noting that it's a consistent reduction in the budget, as it were. It's important to note that the reduction in the budget that has happened in 2014, 2015, it happened without necessarily reducing the service, as it were. For 2016, there is a particular serious decision that was taken within the institution that basically says that we're not going to have the dinner following thereafter. So, which we expect that the costs there too will significantly also come down when we now talk about actual expenditure. And that actual expenditure, we're not going to be in a position to tell you right now because you have to expend first, and then you then be in a position to say how much money have we spent in that regard. But consistently, the figure looks good in this regard, in a sense that we are promising to make sure that Sona does okay as it is expected. And secondly, we have all the procedural elements as they are expected in terms of the Constitution taking place. So there is nothing that will be compromised. in that regard. So all the ceremonial and the procedural aspects will be dealt with. The part that deals with the dinner, as you would know, it's outside of the formal ceremony, as it were. And it's a decision that is taken on a once-off basis. It's not a decision that is taken, going forward to say you're no longer going to have a dinner, as it were. If we find another mechanism that in which we can be able to do this thing, without increasing our costs, of course, we will look at all those mechanisms and measures, as it were. From the broadcasting side, we are working with our colleagues, yourselves in the media, the various formations of media. We're working with our colleagues in the executive in the form of GCIS, who are also assisting us to make sure that we have as wide a connection as possible to various communities, to various sectors. So that is a very important part from a public participation perspective. You would note that the sitting, of course, is happening in the evening. And the sitting happening in the evening basically means that we are going to have more people being in a position to see and listen to what is happening there. We are going to have more people who are going to have access to radio, who are going to be also listening to what is happening. We are going to have more people who are going to use the channels that are provided by GCIS, who are also then going to be in a position to interact and engage with the proposals as put forward by the government in this regard. So, as it were, we have made good plans in this regard. We have also made plans for yourselves so that you will be catered for in the press bay, as it were, and all the facilities that are required in that regard will be available to yourself. We are not expecting any hiccups to happen whatsoever in this regard. So you'll be able to record what is happening. You'll be able to beam what is happening live in terms of television. You'll be able to write the things that need to be written in that regard. So access in this regard, we find it is absolutely crucial. It's a key component of the tenet of our Constitution to make sure that people are able to know what is happening. It's consistent with the principles of openness and making sure that people are able to engage and participate. And in this instance, the engagement would, of course, happen with people firstly knowing what government says it will do, and secondly, they can then take up the issues through the various processes that are provided within Parliament to make sure that they make their contribution to the governance of this particular, of our country. Then on issues of load shedding, we have engaged with the city who provide security, who provide electricity to us. And we have an assurance in this instance that we are not going to have any load shedding. As you would know, the situation has improved greatly in the country, and which means that it's all systems go in that regard. But should an event happen where, for whatever reason, we lose power in that regard, as you would know, we always have backup generators. Backup generators that will kick in within a space of 5 minutes in order to make sure that the business of the day is able to continue. But we are not expecting from our side any kind of load shedding to happen, as it were. So the situation, has improved for the country, and that improvement also has benefited us as Parliament. On matters of safety and security, the plans around safety are consistent with the assessments that have been done. And assessments, of course, they are done with the help of our colleagues who are part and parcel of the planning, noting that the plans, as we engage on them, we're planning a state event. And a state event necessarily means that you engage all the arms of the state, you engage the judiciary, you engage the executive, and as an important arm of the state, you engage also the various security elements. So you would have the army playing the role that they need to play on a ceremonial basis, as it were. You would have the police also playing the role that they have to play, and the various other agencies. So we have made the appropriate plans around security in this regard. We, of course, do not manage the issue of the organizations that may or may not match. I think that, as you would know, is managed through the council. People make their applications to the council, and when they make their applications to the council, the process is that the council will, amongst other stakeholders, contact us and say, these are the organizations that have applied for them to demonstrate if there is any such demonstration whatsoever. And amongst other, then we will then make the necessary arrangements in that regard. And those arrangements in this regard will be handled, of course, by the colleagues in the city, the colleagues in, the police who have to do the work that they have to do. There's an area, I think, that will be identified as it has been done in the previous times, where you have a speaker's corner, where you can have then communities or organizations engaging in whatever acts that they so deem fit in that regard. We will make sure, working with the security agencies and the city, that whatever happens in an orderly fashion, and also is able to strengthen our constitution, as it were. On the stage of the event, colleagues, as you would know, the stage of the event is such that, as I had indicated, we have three arms of the state. Basically, you would have the executive of the country here, you would have the judiciary represented, you would have the members of parliament represented here, and then you would have various leaders of civil society present. You would have people from business, churches, community organizations, universities, and various other luminaries that would come. So the security arrangements will be made to be consistent with that, and they are based on dealing with the assessments. And the assessments, as it were, is not assessments that look at the internal issue. When you do an assessment, which I would not seek to speak as an expert in this regard, but the little that I know about doing assessments is that you look at the international trends, you look at the regional trends, and then you look at what happens in your country, and having taken into consideration all those various elements, then you put in place a security measure that would make sure that the event of this nature happens, and it happens appropriately, and it happens in such a manner that South Africans feel very proud of it and are able to participate and express themselves on their feelings about the event, as it were. The radius and the parameter of the security of the event, that radius, of course, would be done consistent with the assessment and all the relevant agencies that are related to that. On our side, of course, we are also very concerned, as is normally the case, that there are businesses around Parliament, and of course, when such an event happens, it necessarily means for those businesses that are within the radius, as it were, they get affected. But the comfort on that is that the event starts in the evening, right? And when it starts in the evening, it basically means that most of the business would have taken place during the course of the day, and hopefully with less disruption, as it were, and business can go on within the vicinity of Parliament. So all the necessary arrangements are being engaged in this regard and updated accordingly, so that we're going to be in a position to host a good event. With respect to Parliament as a caring organization, and a Parliament as a Parliament of the people, we have to manage, of course, the two elements, as I had indicated. One, issues around access, which are absolute and critical, right? And access is really related to yourselves being given access so that you can do the reporting in that regard, various forms of other media such as radio, television being given access, expanding that footprint and network with other networks of your community-based organizations, and GCIS, who are helping us in this regard in order to make sure that everyone is able to follow what is happening and they're able to interact with it, as it were. We will give details closer to time around your road closures that are planned within the area and the vicinity. And those road closures, of course, will relate to the plans for Parliament, which would be continuously reviewed and updated with our security officials in this regard. We, on our side, administratively, what we are here to say, to assure South Africans and to assure yourselves, is that we are ready to host a successful event for South Africa. We are ready to host a successful event for the members of Parliament. We are ready to ensure that we have a successful event when the President presents his plans. So that's all we have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary to Parliament. The Secretary said there will be no hiccups. He also announced that there will be no dinner, and I suppose with that there will be no beverages of any kind. But there's no linkage between the absence of hiccups and the absence of the beverages. But I suppose I'll leave that to your imagination. Can we now open the floor for questions to the presentation by the Secretary, which he will take, assisted by the Deputy Secretaries who are flanking him. We'll take, as usual, a round of questions. Mr. Joseph Mosia, first up. Shall we take Mr. Vianney Green? Any other hand? Okay, we'll take the two questions. Mr. Mosia, you want to start?
Yes, thank you. Joseph Musia, SABC. I just want to find out, Secretary, you said the city is handling applications for demonstrations and they've forwarded those to you. Do you have any list of political parties that have asked to take part in demonstrations? And are you able to list some of the organizations that will be demonstrating?
Thanks, Mr. Mosia. Mr. Green?
Thank you very much, Vianney Green from SABC. Two questions. The first one, Secretary, you mentioned the issue of transparency, that there are measures that will be put in place to ensure transparency, especially for the journalists. Assuming that there's some disturbances inside the House, will the parliamentary cameras continue rolling, or will they just only focus on this on the Speaker? Secondly, the issue of assessment. You said that there are various state agencies or organs that were consulted to put up this security arrangement. Was NIA or did NIA take part in those security assessments? Thank you.
Okay, we have got three questions. In the absence of any other hand, okay, shall we just take a few more, Secretary, before you respond? Andisiwa?
I mean, I understand 3.6 million is still a lot of money, although you have cut down significantly. Can you tell us what is this money spent on? It's one day, it's 3.6 million. Can you give us a breakdown of what you're spending on?
Thank you. Secretary?
Thank you very much. With regard to the list of parties that have applied or communities, we are not aware of any political party having applied, but as we say, we are not the authority that would, in the first instance, receive the application. It would be the city of Cape Town that would know much better. What we know is that there may be a match from Sona and perhaps maybe the students, but I think those things can be better confirmed with the city, as it were. So on the question of transparency, I think in that regard, we have indicated very clearly around issues of access, which would be access in recording the proceedings. right? Which would be the ceremonial part that would be happening at that time, and the proceedings of the House, right? The policies of Parliament remain. They are not suspended, let's say around broadcasting, so those policies will apply accordingly, as you would know, which basically means that our responsibility as Parliament is to provide feed on the proceedings, right? That is our primary responsibility. It would happen whether you are talking about the proceedings that is moving on to the chamber. We focus mainly on the proceedings. And it would also happen on the proceedings within the chamber. We focus mainly on the proceedings of the House, as our policy would dictate. Then the last question around whether NIA is part of that, as I have indicated, the security agencies are involved in the planning of an event of this nature. And all security agencies, which I am not really the best person placed to say which security agency gets involved and so forth, but I would also think that state security gets involved in a matter of planning an event of this magnitude, which in any country and at any given point, it's one of the highest events of the state. So you would want planning by all the apparatus of the state who are involved in these issues to ensure that they've planned. Now the assessments, of course, they are done, as I would understand, by the cluster, and the various people would make the inputs as they need to in this regard. So the simple answer, I would think so, that they do. The expenditure part on, well, the event of this nature, as you would know, if I were to start with a more direct one and a very clear one, we spend a lot of money in order to make sure that you are able to broadcast, you are able to, communicate with your various organizations and structures, and you're able to beam the information out there. So there is money spent on media. There is money spent on branding, because an event of this nature has to be branded with the theme and all of that. There's money spent on sound and visual. There is money spent on the cultural elements there too, transportation. And we expect the aspects around catering issues and all of that to get reduced significantly, because we are not having a dinner, as it were, but there will be limited catering that is provided for quite a number of guests in this regard. So we have cut as much as we can in this regard in order to make sure that we're able to deal with issues. So our spending items in this regard are standard. They are standard for, any other event that is planned out there. I must also hasten to say that other departments also do their own spending, which they carry in their own elements. So on our part, as Parliament, we have reduced this figure significantly, and we expect it to come down, actually, from where it is, unless something else happens.
Thank you, Secretary. I think all the questions have been answered. Any other questions? Alestine, I just want to note by a show of hands, maybe 3 or 4 questions. Alestine, Mary Ann Merton, okay, Lester Kiewitz, and Isio Makinana again. Is it N at the back? Right, and Denise in that order. Alestine, you want to start?
Good afternoon, Alice from Media 24. You didn't introduce anybody from Protection Services, and I know we've asked this question before, that you, at this stage, Parliament does not have a a head of protection services and a deputy, as they are suspended. And yesterday you told me there are people and acting and divisional managers and that. But in your liaisons with the rest of the security cluster, how confident are you that Parliament is not being overridden in a way? You know, are you? What impact does it have on your liaisons with the rest of it? Yeah, the fact that you don't have that leadership. And also one more thing about the radius. There were talks about a 2-kilometer radius. I just want some clarity on that, please, because as I understood, some of the MPs were quite concerned about, you know, is it different than the years before? Thanks.
Sorry. Marianne Merton, Daily Maverick. Just a clarification, really. When you say you spent quite a lot of money so we're able to broadcast, communicate, and beam the info out there, can you put some rands and cents onto that, and what particularly are those costs? Parliament has an established sounds and vision infrastructure. The broadcasters, be they television or radio, bring their own outside broadcast units, their own cables, their own everything. In previous years, GCIS has taken care of the various broadcast centers in various provinces that may have been organized, so that's not a cost to Parliament. So some details, what exactly you mean by this, and some rands and cents, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Azuka. Lester from ANC. It's a follow-up to Alistair's question. I'd just like to know what preparations are Parliamentary Protection Services going through, if any, following disruptions last year and some disruptions that we've seen inside the chamber throughout last year.
Mr. Mkhihlana, every time you ask about security, you keep talking about the security agencies being in charge of that aspect of the preparations. And knowing what happened last year with the signal being jammed, and you in Parliament coming back afterwards saying you couldn't explain what happened, are you comfortable with leaving all those details to them? Can't you give us something? Are you involved in any way? Are you not concerned concerning the experiences that we've had in the past year? And also with the City of Cape Town and the marches, surely they should have consulted you to say, look, there are people that are planning to march on this day when there's this event. We know that roads are closed and so on. So haven't they consulted you? Don't you have any say in these marches that are taking place in the city on that day?
Good afternoon. I'm Jenny from News 24. What's the relationship now with Nahawu? Are there any threats or still hanging, or has it all been settled? Anything that might affect the event? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That's the end of that round. Secretary, do you want to respond?
Thank you very much. The issue about protection services being overridden, I think there are two questions which were more or less the same, if I'm correct. We have made the necessary plans around work we do internally. Remember, internally, we provide work related to protocol, related to interpretation, media, services in the chamber, guest relations. Protection services falls within those services that we have to provide, both within the House, and secondly, the work that we do for our dignitaries, right, and our guests who have come through. So the plans that we have done in that regard have been done accordingly. To be more precise and specific, when you come to the chamber, there is nothing that we're expecting to change in that regard. Parliament is expected to have the service officers who will be doing work in that regard. It's expected to have protection services officers available. It's expected to have table staff available to support the proceedings of the House. And that really is not meant to be augmented by any other responsibility in this regard. Now, when you talk about security of the precinct, security of the various outer parameters and so forth, that security is provided by the security agencies of our country, and they have the responsibility there. Remember, our responsibility is within Parliament, and even within Parliament, you will note that the access points of Parliament, those are guarded by police, as it were, and of course, because we are having a major event, those access points will be beefed up, and the security around the perimeter and all of that will be beefed up so that you can have a successful event in that regard. So we are not seeing any dilution of our work, and also we have to say very clearly and categorically, we are also not having any takeover of functions that Parliament does by other agencies. What we are doing is consistent with what we have done over years, which has not resulted into any takeover. It's a collaboration between and amongst the various arms of the state and the various layers of government, because you have here the province being involved at that level. You also have local government being involved. So when we talk about security agencies, it's both on a vertical level and on a horizontal level, as it were. So they are engaging there in order to make sure that we have a successful event. Of course, the traffic, the city will be involved around issues of traffic, making sure that we have the relevant road closures and helping us to manage the traffic at that level. Province and national will be working around protection of the event, protecting the guests, and protecting Parliament, as it were, which is normal and usual. And you have the various responsibilities that are played by the security forces of this particular country, noting that we're having a highest event in our calendar. So I think that should cover the issue around protection services or security. If not, you can do a follow-up. Then the second issue around the radius. The radius really, as I have indicated, is determined based on doing an assessment. And it's a technical thing. It's not Parliament sitting and saying, well, we want 1 kilometer, 1.5, and so forth. It's actually a technical process that involves availability of security information that gives guidance on, okay, we think we need to have a radius in this regard. And that really does not require necessarily that aspect, does not require the consent of Parliament, as it were, because it's a security measure that is placed there. The first aspect that I explained around protection services, that we are in control of. We don't have to be consulting, necessarily the security agencies, but you want coordinated security amongst all the players that are at play, both at the national level, provincial level, and local government level. When you talk about the rands and cents, we're asking questions in terms of the budget, right? And this is really the budget, and we must distinguish it from the actual expenditure, because actual expenditure will give us some reality on exactly what has happened in that regard. You would have, for instance, on about 2 or 3 items. On media, we have actually 475. Right? If we were to be a little bit more precise, the money that we spend at that level. And really, it's not correct to say that Parliament is geared up for Sona every day, right? The mechanisms that we have here are to manage our normal business. Sona is a huge, big event. It's an event which attracts extraordinary attention from a wide variety of stakeholders, including the media. The kind of equipment and facilities that, if you are to be a little bit more specific, that the media would bring, will be far much more greater than what you would normally find here. And we then have to make sure that those requirements are met. Over and above that, you are quite correct that we link up with the GCIS and use those elements that are related to the GCIS. We use facilities that are related to the SABC, and we use facilities that also other challenge provide at our disposal based on the agreements that as it were. So it's really quite a mammoth task that we are dealing with, because we are not dealing with an ordinary day's event of today. Matters of today, we can handle those. But if you're talking about a very big event in the calendar of South Africa, then you have to make the necessary arrangements as it were. Then on the question of signal jamming, I mean, we have to say very clearly and categorically that we are not expecting any signal jamming. This is the very same statement that was made last year when the issue arose. And we also have to reiterate that the department did come out clear to say what happened, and they explained themselves in that regard. We have no reason, I think, on our side to doubt that or to second guess their issues in this regard. So we're not expecting that. We have not been advised of any such event being planned. And we don't think that would happen. If you recall, the department concerned did indicate that the event was unfortunate and it was not meant to happen, as it were. So I think on that score, we should leave it at that. Then the issues around the matches, whether we should know, we have indicated the ones that we are aware of, right? We have indicated that we are aware of Sescona, we are aware of the fees must fall, but that really will be based on submissions that have been made to the city. We do not have, as Parliament, any other submission that has come through or anything that we have been made aware of. So if there is any such application that has been made, we are quite certain that the city would have made us aware, as they normally do. And if they do, we will give you updated information, as it were. Right now, this is the information we have, and these are the arrangements that have been made. We've been consulted in that regard, and as I've indicated, the city has an obligation to consult us. They have an obligation to consult the police, and they have an obligation to consult many other stakeholders who may be affected by any match. And that is the law, and that's how it has been applied, and we are quite happy in the manner in which it has been done so far. The colleagues in the city are part and parcel of our planning process. We have what we call a joint stakeholder meeting, which includes the city, and it includes the province. So there we're able to share information to say, what is upcoming, what has been approved, what are the challenges, what are the numbers that we're looking at, where are the people going to be, and how should we plan properly for that event. And if you require perhaps emergency services, those in emergency services, they are also alerted, and so forth and so forth. If it's going to affect certain businesses, those businesses are affected, are also engaged, so that they can proffer their views, whether they're happy with the match or not. So that is the process that we think the city basically follow, and that's the information that we have for now. If there's any updated information, we'll provide that either through such briefings or through Luzuko, who is liaising with yourself. On the issue of the relationship with the union and whether we're expecting any kind of action, from our side, as we have indicated, we have a specific agreement with the union that both parties are working on. We do not have any indication that says there will be any kind of disruption. But of course, that, as you would know, any kind of relationship is dependent on both parties. So we can't really say So from our side, we're not expecting any kind of upheavals or disruptions that would emanate from that quarter. I don't know whether I've left anything out.
Not that I'm aware of, Secretary. Denise, that would be something new or a follow-up. Shall we take a final round of question or final question, whatever the case may be? Is there any other question other than Denise's? Denise, I think you'll have the honors to ask the final question.
Thanks very much, Denise from The Citizen. I'm under, it's 20, the President gets 20 tickets to invite people, as well as the Deputy President also gets 20. And then it's the discretion of Parliament. I might be incorrect. But can you give me an example of some of the people that Parliament may have invited? Obviously, you can't speak for the President and you can't speak for the Deputy President. But has Parliament perhaps maybe invited de Klerk or possibly Thabo Mbeki? Thanks.
Thank you very much. Broadly, there are three categories. There's the category that is invited by the President, who is the main person for the day, having convened the sitting. There is a category of people invited by parties. So political parties also get tickets proportionally. Then there is a category of people invited, not people actually, organizations invited by Parliament, right? And in the category of, let's say, people and organizations invited by Parliament, you have your former presidents and deputy presidents who are invited as a matter of course. Right? I think when we are making a press briefing with the presiding officers, we'll be able to indicate to yourself very clearly who has accepted and so forth. But all, invitations go to all presidents and former presidents. It goes to all presiding officers who have served Parliament. It goes to, we have a category then of civil society, which would cover business, institutions of higher learning, churches, community-based organizations, traditional leaders, and we also invite eminent persons that I spoke about, where we are working with the various provincial legislatures, the various provinces to identify people. Then we also invite a category, I think, that comes randomly from the public, where we make sure that we give it the very least, based on the limited number of tickets that we have, we give members of the public through a competition that we run through various media houses. I think it's mainly radio that we use, and people who have won tickets in that regard then are able to participate in Parliament, so that we don't limit it only to organized formations. So I think that's broadly the categories that we have. So. In short, all presidents have been invited, and former president, deputy president. To be more specific, I know former deputy president de Klerk was invited. I know former President Mbeki was invited. So, yeah.
Thank you, Secretary. Before we bring it to a close, the Acting Manager for Media, Mr. Modise Kaveri, would like to make 2 or 3 important announcements for your attention.
Thanks, Mr. J. Colleagues, in terms of, mine is to speak about accreditation in order to facilitate that in relation to our hosting of the State of the Nation address. We've had 800 applications for accreditation for this year, which is higher than we usually get. We usually get about 600 or 650, but this year we have 800. Of those, 727 have already been accredited, and they are on our website. We're still sorting out the logistics with the others. We only have a few problems that need to be sorted out that relate to the issue of people not submitting the information as it was requested to them. But we are sorting those out. What is important for you to note is that the accreditation tags are available for collection in 90 Plain Street, upper ground. The accreditation area is going to be opened from 8 o'clock in the morning up until 6 o'clock, from now up until on Wednesday. Please make sure that you collect your accreditations during those times. We are not going to open any accreditation in Parliament in the precinct on Thursday. So if you are not collecting yours before that, you'll have to go to the City Hall to collect the accreditation. Please make sure that you abide by that. No one is going to be allowed into the precinct without the accreditation, or actually to work during that day without that accreditation. And the last announcement is that we have lunch outside. Please, everyone is welcome to join us for the lunch. Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Modise. Thank you, Secretary to Parliament, deputies, and members of management. All of us are invited to lunch outside. The press briefing is adjourned. Thank you.